Welcome to the very first video for Voetsekker. Well, if you don't know what a Voetsekker is, let's just boil it down to there's people wanting to utilize the refugee program towards America, and the haters started calling them or us Voetsekkers. My case at the moment, I'm a wannabe Voetsekker at this stage. So the purpose of the channel will be to follow my journey to getting this refugee status, hopefully, and be successful with it and moving to America. But to do that, there's conditions, terms, criteria. So in this video, I think this is an appropriate start where Johan Alles interviews Beeden from Afrikaners to actually find out what it's about and how to go about it, and chat a little bit about South Africa in general. I'll put a link in the description to the main or the original video. So in the meantime, guys, please like, subscribe, and join our Facebook group. So let's get into it.
It's Beeden, spokesperson for the Afrikaners. It's a website, it's a resource for South Africans to help South Africans to resettle in the United States of America. Katja is a social media activist, I think in general terms an activist. So you became an activist and then a social media activist. I'm not quite sure how all of this worked, but anyway. You're also the spokesperson for the Afrikaners, the South African refugees in the United States of America. Welcome to the program.
There we go. Thanks. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. So obviously...
Well, I just want to start off by saying I think we should be grateful for people like this to actually bring the information and all the stuff that we need together and helping with this whole process.
The US government handles the whole refugee process. So that is not our business at all, okay? It's a free program offered from the United States government, and anything to do with the process of applying and going through the process has nothing to do with us. That is official US government territory, okay? And we fully respect that. What we offer is community and support, because what we found when this whole thing got announced, there was no information out there. There was no one to turn to. There was nothing in mainstream media. So a group of us got together just to offer each other emotional support, to share information. You know, people don't know, do I need an updated passport? Do I need a birth certificate? I'm feeling really stressed and anxious. What do I do? So really, the goal and the vision was just to create community and support for each other. And Sam has now extended her vision, and she's got people in the US as well, where, you know, if you get to America and you want help in how to find a school, how to find a job. So we've actually put out some really cool information about how to structure your CV in America. What does that look like?
Yeah.
So Sam's business partner on that side has been putting out some really cool, just practical content like that, which is really, really helpful, you know, because things are a little bit different. And she lives in America. So it's just, you know, also you drive on the different side of the road in America. So it's just like those little things, you know, information about the different states, just providing information and support. And it's all free. We're not doing this for a fee. You know, this is not, there's no nefarious motives behind any of this.
I think you got to remember this, guys, especially a lot of the newer people that wants to join the program. Don't fall for any scams where you are charged or people want money to actually help you. Don't fall for any of those scams.
It's just to build community and support.
What were the things that you think that would qualify one to get the status of a refugee? What would be the Americans' criteria for that thing that will point to what it is or why you say you're being persecuted in South Africa?
Well, first of all, on their one-pager where you do your statement of intent, they make it very clear that this refugee status is being offered to Afrikaners and other minority South Africans, okay? And we know for a fact, for example, that the very left-leaning mainstream media really try to paint Trump as a white supremacist racist because this is only for white people.
Yeah.
But no one was really acknowledging the fact that on that first flight of 59, there was actually a colored family, okay, who met the criteria for being in a minority group and persecuted. So anyone that is a South African citizen and is either Afrikaans or part of one of the persecuted minority groups in South Africa, if you can verbally speak of actual past persecution that you've been through based on religion, race, or nationality, or have a well-founded fear of future persecution, then you qualify. However, there's still a very strict vetting process that you go through after that. I think there's 3 interviews that you go through.
Yeah, and that's the sitting down and telling your
Check,
story.
right? There's a medical check, there's chest x-rays. So, I mean, there is quite a story.
This process you're going through, you guys need to remember that this process has evolved from the first 59, as well as every individual case is treated differently. So make sure that what works or the way my journey won't be the exact same for everybody. So take note of that as well.
Vetting process to go through, and you have to be able to verbalize past persecution or a well-founded fear of future persecution, because this is not financial immigration.
Just a silly question that popped in my mind now, Katja. I am part of that minority that you talk about because I am an Afrikaner. But help me out here. You're an English South African. There are not so many of you either. So why aren't you?
This is another point that a lot of people miss. When Black people in South Africa, or most people in Africa, refer to Afrikaner, they don't actually mean that small group of just pure Afrikaner. They're actually talking about whites in South Africa. So that's actually a broad term, and then people want to make that a very technical small group that apparently gets all the privilege and the rest is excluded.
You're part of the minorities in South Africa as well.
Well, I am, because the executive order is very clear. It is for Afrikaners and minority South Africans.
So English South Africans qualified to be minority group.
Absolutely, yes,
Okay,
yes.
okay. Now I just wanted to clear that in my head.
Because if you think about it, the persecution on terms of race in this country, those 142 race-based laws are targeted at Afrikaans and English-speaking minority groups, okay?
Yeah.
So I'm just as persecuted as someone that speaks Afrikaans.
Yeah.
And if we really want to get technical, my Oma was a De Beer and one of the 1820 settlers, okay?
So you fully qualify for that matter.
I fully qualify.
And would the Americans respect that as well, that you fully qualify?
To be quite frank, if you look at the wording of the executive order, we don't have to prove heritage. We don't have to do genetic tests, okay? If you are an Afrikaner or part of the minority group in this country, and you are directly impacted by the 140 race-based laws, kill the boer, kill the farmer, that gets sung as hate speech, expropriation without compensation, the Bella Act, threatening to disarm private security, the Racial Quotas Act, all right?
Yeah.
All of us
the key qualification is that you belong to a minority, and that in some form or another you've become targeted, or you are targeted, or you are the
based on your race.
Yeah.
Yes, based on race, nationality, or religion. Yeah, if you have been persecuted based on race, nationality, or religion, and by default, okay, the South African government has actually set up the criteria because they've written into law. This is what makes South Africa unique. Okay,
Yeah.
I think we're probably the only country in the world where it has black and white and Indian and colored. Those very clear key racial divisions are written into law. And now with this new, more stringent Racial Quotas Act, for example, it specifies so many blacks can get into university to study medicine, so many Indians, so many whites, so many colors, and that we got.
This is actually a problem that we're facing, and one of our main decisions on going over now is my daughter has done good enough, 92% averages at school, but to get into medical, she can't get into it because of the color of her skin. So we need to look at alternatives opposed to just going to the universities here.
Become even more stringent with the racial quotas in terms of jobs. So it's, in fact, the ANC government has very clearly demarcated who qualifies and who doesn't by
Great
virtue
irony.
of the policies.
Great irony, tremendous. I mean, this is really crazy.
Yeah.
But Katja, let's be fair now. In terms of how we actually understand the terminology here as well, and I think it's also to some extent it's optics as well.
Yeah.
Because if you look at it purely from the point of view of the optics, and you talk about the Ukrainian refugee crisis and what you see in front of your eyes, and you talk about the Afghanistan refugee, the Sudanese refugee, the Congo refugee crisis, and you put the images of these refugees right next to the images of the 59 South Africans, then it's pretty easy to imagine that the 59 Afrikaners, they don't smell and feel and appear to be the refugee status that they've received. There seems to be, I mean, that's part of the story.
This is a big irk for me, where, of course, we've got pride. We've got, I don't know, we've got a pride in ourselves where we try and fight and hold on and make plans. And because we try and stay civilized, we don't qualify, or we don't fit the image.
Yeah, but when you speak to those refugees like I have, okay, and you listen to their stories, you're not seeing the girl who lost her arm because it was hacked off with a matchet, or the boy who was put in boiling water and his skin peeled off into the bath, or the man that was hacked to death and then Afrikaans Bible left on his body, or the woman that had glass bottles shoved up her vagina after being raped, okay? Yeah, the optics.
This is what media doesn't show. And what she's mentioned here is just the tip of the iceberg. There's been a lot more work done than what she's mentioned now. And just because it gets blocked on social media, because you can't just show it, doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
You're not seeing that, all right? But those people are refugees because that is what has happened to them, and that is the threat that is going to potentially happen to someone like me as well.
If what you just described now in fairly stark and dramatic terms, if that was in fact who those people are, then I'm quite sure that Donald Trump and the American press would have actually made that a key issue. We would have seen the images.
It is a key issue.
Seen the horrors.
I think they actually have done that, but they've also got, or they know more than they actually disclose. I don't think everything that, or all these decisions they've made, is because of the pictures they've shown in the Oval Office. That's a lot of BS, in my opinion. They know a lot more than we know in many cases. As somebody that used to be in the police force, I can tell you a lot of crime does not go into media, and the severity of those crimes gets underplayed.
Look, this has been.
I'm not saying that these people, Katja, I'm not in any way suggesting that these people did not go through horrible things. But what I'm trying to say is that you paint a very horrific image now, and what the world sees are actually a handsome group of well-fed people. That's the optics that I'm talking about. And I think that determines also the way the gut reaction to it. That's one part of it. The other part of it is if you also just simply...
You mentioned something here, a group of well-fed people. And it's kind of when you go for your interviews and you go through this process, like in our case, when we went for our interviews, the people that is not well fed, like he put it, let's just keep to the term of well fed, that struggles to make ends meet. There's a lot of them as well. It's not just blacks.
Talk about the actual internationally recognized definition of what a refugee is supposed to be, according to, I would imagine, the
Go and Google it. Go and Google that right now and read it to me.
Yeah, no. Well, you obviously have the information, so help me out on that. Does it qualify? Do these people that we've seen?
You see, this is a problem. All respect to Johan. I mean, to just make that statement insinuates that they don't qualify, but he himself is not sure what the criteria is through international law.
They've gone out there, and my heart is with them. I have absolutely all the empathy that you can imagine I have for them, and I'm not even denying their status. I'm just merely questioning it because that is what the so-called left is doing right now. Do they actually qualify?
I think this is where the confusion comes in, all right? To qualify for refugee status, you have to be persecuted based on your race, your nationality, or your religion, or have a well-founded fear of that, all right? Where things have gone a little bit hairy in the past, and this is what the Trump administration pointed out, all right? America is not, their role is not to save third world countries from themselves. In other words, in countries like Sudan, for example, okay, where there's poverty and bad governance and dictators and there's people starving, it's not America's job to go and save starving people from bad governance. And the refugee program, to a large extent, has become that. Okay. So whether I'm starving in Sudan because I've got a dictator government and I'm being persecuted, or whether I'm a farmer in South Africa who's been persecuted, I'm still a refugee. I'm still being persecuted. But for some reason, the world has this image, okay, that a refugee is a starving African that's under bad governance.
And this is exactly true. They expect you to be black. They expect you to be starving. They expect you not to own anything. They expect you to live on the streets and be totally uninformed.
And I think, like I said, the Trump administration made that delineation, right? Our job is to help real people undergoing real persecution, but that is not to be confused with a charitable job of saving people from bad governments because their governments aren't looking after them. I hope that clears it up a little bit.
I can understand why people question this. I can understand that if you look at the refugees, for example, that has been queuing up for the last 2 or 3 years to get access to America from a country like Afghanistan, for example, I can understand why the media is calling this out in a way. So
okay, but you know the media. But hang on, let's just pause here for a moment. This is also where the media has been dishonest. Okay. So yes, Trump did put a halt on the refugee program internationally, and he did that for good cause. Because under the Biden administration, it wasn't being used ethically, and they wanted to take a step back and make sure that those people that were being allowed into America were being vetted properly and were proper refugees, and that the system wasn't being abused. But when you go and read the fine print, it also states that on a case-by-case basis and at the discretion of the various officials involved with all these different refugees around the world, they are still letting refugees in. And I think a couple of weeks ago, I was listening to the numbers, and it was well over 660 refugees that had actually been let in internationally from around the world, of which only 59 were South African. And the mainstream media is very quick to ignore that fact.
Yeah.
Okay?
All I'm saying to you, and I know that the viewers that are watching this right now is going to send me hate mail for this. I know that. But I'm trying to make you understand, when I talk about the perception, is a lot of people said this to me, in fact, here in where I live in Amsterdam.
I'm not interested
in maybe that's a European.
I'm interested in facts and truth.
It just seems to me that there's an argument to be made. I remember the chap that was being interviewed by the BBC, who told the BBC interviewer that he's left his house with 5 bedrooms, his dog and his grandmother behind. That,
you see, already there. So what they don't get is, so he's got a 5-bedroom house. He's got his grandmother. First thing is, for that house and for a luxury life, as they want to put it, what must be your fear of persecution, your level of fear for persecution? What must have happened to you? And what do you see the future as, to be willing just to leave all that, knowing that where you're going, you're not going to have that. You're going to downscale drastically. And then from there, leaving your grandma, or sometimes your children that's adults already, the people is quick to say, my body, my life, my choice. So what about them? If my child doesn't want to go, can I force it? I can't force it. I can't force my mother or father. It's totally up to them. They might not disagree. I might not disagree, but it does not mean they must be forced to go, because, and even most of them that's willing to stay and fight acknowledges the problems, and they acknowledge the persecution. They fear for starting over is just bigger at this stage.
that does not measure up to the refugee who is escaping bombs that are raining down on them.
Yeah, we might not be escaping bombs, but we are escaping angry mobs chanting, kill the boar, kill the farmer with matches, hacking and raping us. Okay, that's what we're escaping. And until you
So a bomb is not sent by your government. Your government, where you are staying at this stage, is not chanting, drop a bomb, drop a bomb. That government is not putting laws in place so it's easier for those bombs to be dropped on you. I'm not saying they are not entitled to refugee status, but it's a different kind of scenario. Different things happen, different perspectives. But the thing is, if you're being targeted, my daughter had an attempt to be kidnapped, but now she's too scared, and I'm too scared to have her walk 500 meters alone to a shop. She has to stay in house most of the time. Is that life or not?
A victim of violent crime like myself and those other Afrikaners have been, you will not truly understand, okay? When you look at Malema whipping up the masses to sing kill the boer, kill the farmer, kill the boer, kill the farmer, and they actually rock up on your property at 3, 4 in the morning and violently rape you and kill you and put your kids in boiling water, you tell me, is optics important? Because in this country, that persecution and that racial hatred doesn't just target those that are poor on the streets. It targets the man with a 5-bedroom farmhouse. It targets the white woman that lives just outside of Joburg, not far from Sandton.
Let me just say this to you, KJ. I have, in the last week, I interviewed the 2 women, the parents were brutally murdered, the Hartswater murders. I fully understand. And I also got from them, told me about the horrific torture, I think for 18 hours or something like that.
That's not
This is the thing. It's 18 hours of torture. This is what that's being done. It's 18 hours of severe torture. If you survive that, you're scarred for life. If a bomb gets dropped on you, it's done, over and done with. Yes, you'd lose your house. But in a sense, you lose more than your house if you are being raped, tortured for 18 hours.
normal. That's not really
so what I'm saying with that is that I really am deeply, and even if I just scroll through social media and I see the horrific images flashing by, it makes a huge impact on me as well. And I understand the pain and the suffering of people.
And that's why I'm a voice for voices, and that's why I'm a spokeswoman for Amerikaners, because the left and the people that are saying we're not refugees don't know the truth of what's happening in this country. And I am using my voice to get the truth out so that people can understand what is really happening here. We thought this was going to be the Rainbow Nation and this wonderful success story of a multicultural Africa. That was the dream.
I hear what you're saying. I hear what you say. I understand what you say. And when one personalizes it like that, and as I said, I just 1 week ago sat down with 2 beautiful women who told me about in what horrific manner the mother, the father, and the sister were brutally tortured and killed.
Does her family deserve refugee status?
I do not know if it qualifies for in terms of the actual legal definition of what it is to be a refugee, or if it qualifies for what would be the internationally recognized definition for what is a genocide. I think that's where the discussion lies, is what is internationally recognized. And, and that's one part of it. The other part of it, and I hate myself for saying that, is that there's a lot of pain in the world. There's a ginormous amount of suffering in the world in all sorts of countries around the world. That's why there are also specific definitions. And let me ask you this question then, is do you believe that, and I think this will maybe drive home the point I'm trying to make, do you believe that the Afrikaner in particular is a persecuted group structure in South Africa?
Yes.
Okay, explain to me how.
142.
It's there's no two ways about that. There's no debate about that. People try and make it a debate, but it's not.
Race-based laws directly targeting the Afrikaner and the white minority in South Africa. The Bella Act that came in, which is basically a cultural genocide, preventing them from educating their children in their mother tongue in the way that they want to. All right. Expropriation without compensation. The Racial Quotas Act. Do you want me to go on?
Well, no, I'd like to dissect it. Because once again, it's not about what I think. It's not about whether my heart bleeds or don't bleed. I'm just trying. I hear what people are saying, and I'm trying to kind of.
I get it.
Unpack it all and try to see where it makes sense to me. Let's talk about and now I know people are going to really be angry with me, but this is what people are saying here. And this is what a journalist here would say to you. Journalists here, and I can feel the hate mail coming to me, but journalists here would say to me that you're a little bit disingenuous when you talk about 142 race laws.
Hmm?
Because they would describe those, what you describe as race laws,
Mhm.
as what the Americans would call affirmative action,
Mhm.
what most of the European Union countries would describe as affirmative action.
Mhm.
The American affirmative action being in place since the 60s.
Mhm.
Direct.
So if it's affirmative action, it's not race-based. That's the argument. But that argument is bullshit, because if you think about it, if they want to correct the past, according to them, was based on race being excluded. So you can't fix it without it being race-based. So what is BEE? Okay, so BEE, or affirmative action. But okay, so that is when one racial group gets preferences. So it's got to be race-based. To say it's not race-based is wrong. You can justify maybe why that should be implemented, but whatever. Although it might be however flawed, but it's still race-based.
They call them in America. In fact, they're executive orders in America. I had a chat to the chief whip of the Inkonto Isizwe party about 2-3 weeks ago, and please forgive me, I cannot, Minywani or something like that is his surname. I'm ignorant when it comes to some of these black surnames. And he said to me, while we were doing this chat, he said to me, I challenge you to find one race law in South Africa. What you're referring to is black economic empowerment laws. It's trying to correct the path of the injustices of the past. It is nothing.
This is what you can't do it. Why? Because they don't see it as race-based. But you can't make that law, you can't put that law or that BEE status on there without mentioning a race. Because you started off with black. So black already specifies a race. So whether or not BEE is justified or not, they don't even want to go to that argument. They just want to say, no, it's not race-based. Oh, I don't get that. It is race-based. Because take out the black. So what is it then?
But what they would call in America affirmative action laws.
Okay, so I agree. 30 years ago, when we became a democracy and BEE was introduced, we were all okay with that. We understood that there needed to be transformation, redress, and a balancing out.
Mm-hmm.
And all of us were totally cool with that. All right, we understood it, we supported it, we celebrated it, we welcomed it. But now it's 32 years later. And what was supposed to bring transformation and redress and balance hasn't happened because the ANC is a criminal organization who only cares about the political elite. So all the money and all the taxes that were supposed to go to their own people to build housing, to balance things out, to fix roads, infrastructure, none of that was given to their own people. It all was robbed and looted and put into their own pockets. And now, 32 years later, we've got a country with no rail, no electricity, no infrastructure. Their people are starving. We've got no jobs. And they don't want to take the blame. They don't want to take responsibility for their thieving and their ineptitude. So they are blaming the imbalance on apartheid, and they're blaming the imbalance on the Afrikaner to hide their own criminality. So BEE is not about redress and transformation anymore. It's now become something ugly. It's become something punitive.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you there because you said BEE is no longer
Yes.
an instrument for the desired change. So
32 years later.
what you say is
32 years later.
Well, I can tell you, I told this to another guest that I interviewed a couple of days ago. I am white. I live in Amsterdam, in Holland. If I want to get a fund to do a project and there's one black guy that stands in that same queue, I can bet you that that black guy is going to get the fund and I'm not going to get it.
Okay, but here's the difference. So it's the same concept, same principle, whatever you want to call it. But here's the difference. In Holland, or Netherlands, wherever, white is the majority by 10 or 20 to 1. So, yes, there's one in front of you. just one in front of you, but the rest is your white counterparts or citizenships or whatever. South Africa, there's not one in front of you or next to you. There's 10 times that. And what do I mean by that? White South Africans is less than 4 million or 4 million. Let's work on 4 million or 7% of the population. That means the other or blacks, which is 80% of the population, 10 times more. So there's, before you even have any chance, there will be 10 blacks in front of you. Without the correct qualifications most of the time. If the qualifications is there, by all means.
So
That's
what I'm
the most qualified person who can do the best job should get the project. That is just how, that's the natural order of things.
Yeah.
So this whole thing happening in Europe and around the world is just, it is just deeply flawed.
Yeah, the decay that I obviously see from here, that the world sees. We heard Cyril Ramaphosa, once again back to those 140 or 42 race laws. Ramaphosa in the last few days, I think, made it quite clear, no go. There is also no go that they're going to change affirmative action or black economic empowerment.
They've just doubled down. They just doubled down.
But now here's the other level that we've reached now that I think is worth thinking about for a moment. We've now gone so far that we have Donald Trump calling it a genocide.
I agree with him. It is.
And yeah,
so this is a debate that I can make a whole video on this, whether or not it's a genocide. And from my perspective, forget about the 10 steps or conditions for genocide. If you ask the average person, what is genocide? It will come down to you get or you kill every single Afrikaner or white or Indian or whatever. That is extermination. But is it truly that, and can that truly happen?
Problem is, how much more can you up that ante? What are you left with at the end of the day? What is the next thing that you can call? Because this is what Max de Pree said the other day in the light of all of this. Well, you know, there will be another day. And if there will be another day, he more or less said, soon we will forget about this discussion around whether these people ought to get refugee status or not. Soon we'll get beyond the discussion of whether there's a genocide or not going on in South Africa. And we'll be back to there will be another day. What do you and I have left once we've called out all these things, named all these things? We know, how far can we go beyond? What's the next thing beyond genocide that you and I can call out to the world to try to get attention to it or to change the situation in South Africa?
I don't think you can go any further than genocide. I think by the time you're using genocidal type language, I think you've reached the edge of the cliff. I don't think there is.
So let's take this a step further. So genocide is the final act in this whole process, or basically the term for the whole process. Compare that to murder. If somebody plans a murder, they plan to execute somebody, they try to assassinate somebody, and that gets known, or that plan gets exposed. Law steps in to stop that murder, that killing, whatever. And at the end, it's not killing anymore. But the term is, if you left it, it would have been a killing, or somebody would have been killed. Same with genocide. If you leave it, nothing's being done. It can end up in a full-scale genocide. Although 8 out of 10 things might have already be in place for the genocide, it doesn't matter. Because now at this stage, nobody wants to do anything about that. But it hasn't happened. There's no such thing. Same with murder. If the killing or the murder has not happened yet, we don't turn around and say, there's no murder, don't do anything.
Is any lower that you can go. And I fundamentally believe that we are at stage 8 of a genocide in South Africa. Stage 9 is what we call extermination. We already have bodies piling up in terms of the race-based farm murders that are happening. And that's over and above the massive crime problem we have that affects all citizens. Okay, so we've got both of that happening in South Africa. I think genocide is the end of the line. I don't think you can go any more harder than that. And all that is left is for each individual person, black or white, to ask themselves, should I stay or should I go? There's some hard choices to make. And as South Africans, we're in a very hard situation. We don't have easy choices. There are those that are staying to fight, and I admire them, and I think they are very courageous, but I think that they're insane. I think that they're risking their lives and their families' lives. There are those that are just burying their heads in the sand and saying there's no problem and are just in denial. But that's just naive and stupid. And yes, you might be living in your luxury mansion in your security village and your bubble, and life is hunky-dory. And I'm glad that you're so blessed. But me and the majority of us don't live like that and do have boots on the ground and actually do see the reality of what's going on.
I'll add one thing to that as well. And there's a third one. So you either want to stay and fight now, you've got hope, or you're on the other side that you've got to go. Like in my case, I know I have to go for my daughter's sake. And then there's the people that stick their head in the ground and nothing's wrong. But there's also people that they'd rather not take up like the refugee program because it's a Trump thing. The hate for Trump is more than the security of their family, if that sort of makes sense. They'd rather have spite Trump or fuck Trump or whatever than take care of their family. And I've seen this with a lot of Trump haters where the hate is so much for that man that anything else is better.
And I'm actually so glad I'm not living such a privileged life that I don't know what's going on. I'm glad that I'm in the raw reality of it and have been bitten by it myself and know what the truth of the matter is. That's a gift. So it's basically you can stay, you can try and change it, or you can go. Those are your three options. And I think each individual South African has some very hard choices to make.
Yeah.
And none of them are easy, and none of them are bringing a lot of joy right now. They're hard.
I'll tell you something that I told another guest, and I'll repeat it here again. I met a lot of the South African ANC leaders during the time of change, one of them being Thabo Mbeki. And I remember a day standing on in Montreux in Switzerland at some international conference which Mbeki attended. And we were standing the Lac Le Mans and the sunset of Montreux, beautiful, spectacular scene. He was smoking his pipe, and I, those days, still smoked cigarettes. I smoked a cigarette, and he was smoking a pipe. And we had an informal moment in which we just chatted, and I talked about my future in the country, i.e. the future of the white man in the country. And Mbeki then told me, more or less at that stage, and this was in the late 90s, I think, what South Africa's future will be. And I will end it with what the final.
I want to hear this. What did you say?
Mbeki said that there will be three phases to the revolution.
There we go. I've got goosebumps already.
he said that the first phase would be taking the structures, government, the police, the military, infrastructure, the institution. The second phase, he said, will be a cooling down period. That will mean white men will get used to the new system. And the third step of this revolution will be the economic revolution. And that I did not realize at the time, but many years later, it struck me was a definition of the national democratic revolution that he was describing. And then he said something that I always used to tell people in my own language, in Afrikaans. I always translated his words because I could not remember exactly how I phrased it, but in Afrikaans I phrased it, him saying, "Die ANC het 'n lang asem."
What does that sound like? Is that not basically the same thing that Ramaphosa has said in an interview with a journalist? Treat whites like frogs, boil them slowly, so they don't notice. It's the same thing, same concept. Yeah, and Becky said it, just in a different way. So there's a lot of frogs in the water that at this stage has not realized it's getting judged.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Yep.
And that's the way.
The long game. They're playing the long game.
And that was, at the time, it did not sink in what he said. But as I grew older and understood more of what was going on in South Africa, I understood the ANC's game a lot more. And it leaves me then, and I think we have to close down. I'll get your opinion on this. The hopelessness of the situation, I can feel and understand. I know there's a lot of people that are saying we will fight through, and blah, 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 and all the rest of it and so on. But there's something that's sort of in my own mind that looks like a kind of an evolution that is taking place at the moment, which is sort of eating away at the white man, or at least the white man's world in South Africa. That seems to me to be inevitable. And I now know that a lot of people are going to hate what I'm saying now. Do you think that that is what it is? That Africa will claim itself back again and will wash out that which history brought them?
I know that's what Africa wants. And I know because I've spoken to African men from all over Africa, Congo, Rwanda, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Rwanda, spoken to them all because they happen to be Uber drivers here in Cape Town, and I used Uber for about 8 years and had many, many conversations. And they all basically, look, they've all got their own terrible war and persecution that they've run from. I just want to say Africa is a deeply traumatized continent, not just against white people, but against its own. The stab wounds and the stories from these men is, I actually get tears in my eyes just thinking of some of them that I've spoken to, and the terror and the horror that is still in their eyes. Africa is incredibly violent. And a lot of the political leaders are just murderous criminals, what they allow to happen to their people. And a lot of those people run away and end up here in Africa. So we are surrounded by a lot of very traumatized people in this country. Everyone just trying to eke out a living. But speaking to them about this black-white issue, and this was me having conversations, white woman with a black traumatized man from somewhere in Africa. No racism between us, just two humans, just sharing a moment and talking life. No racism, two equals. And they said that unfortunately there is, in Africa, in Zimbabwe, in South Africa, there is a level of racism. And an actual, like he said, the ANC hates the white man, hates them, and wants to drive them out. So there is this very powerful force that does see the white man as an invader, as a colonizer. Not all, okay? Because, for example, these men that I spoke to didn't see me that way and quite liked having the mix.
This is true. And the thing about it, it is not all like she says. If you were to look at South Africa now, I think 70% of people here will live in harmony. The 30% is the problem. Let's say 20 or 30%. And what makes it difficult, or what makes it a big issue for whites, is that 30% of them is so much more than 100% of whites in South Africa.
Of the perks of mixing cultures and what that brings, okay? Because the average person on the street just wants to educate their children, run their business, and live their lives, and they don't care about the color of your skin. But unfortunately, there are these political groups, and they are the ones in power that are driving this hatred, and wants to see the white man out. So that is what I find so frightening, and that is what I find scary. It's that evil political component of hatred that is driving all of this. But is that how the average person on the street feels? No. No. But unfortunately, those very wicked, corrupt politicians, I feel, this is my opinion, they've deliberately kept the masses uneducated, because an uneducated mass who's dependent on a 300 Rand a month SASSA grant is much more easy to control and manipulate. And you can feed them this narrative of white man bad and use them as a weapon to keep yourself in power. And that's really what I think it's about at the end of the day. And that is what potentially could drive white man out.
Well, this is a fairly dark chat we're having here.
Dark times. Dark times.
I'm a last question, just your thoughts on this. What I find so perplexing, I remember many years ago visiting and with a group of people, and in the group, one or two old white grannies, white people, visiting Benin in North Africa. I think at the time, and I think if you'd go and Google, you'll find Benin is probably, if not the poorest nation in Africa, some of the poorest nations in the entire world. And yet at 12 o'clock at night time, we were able to walk through the streets of the city, and we were able to walk around the neighborhoods and felt a sense of security and well-being. What is it that makes South Africa, the country that I grew up in, the country that I so love, the country where I walked free as a child? We had everything in that country. The blue skies belonged to us. What makes us this violent, violent beast?
Do you want to really know what I think? I'm a
Mhm.
Christian. It's spiritual warfare. And the devil comes to kill, steal, and destroy. Unfortunately, the ANC is godless. They practice the occult. They use witch doctors and speak to the dead. And that unfortunately brings with it a very dark demonic force. And that is unfortunately the force that is dominating right now. And we can see that by the stealing, the looting, the killing, the destroying. It's spiritual warfare, in my opinion.
Katja Beeden, thank you very much for this discussion. Thanks so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank
Well, guys, that was my reacting to this interview. I think it was actually a very interesting interview, and I think a lot of refugees needs to see this. Um, and I think we need to stay vigilant. And let me know in the comments what you guys think. In any case, thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, and join our Facebook group.